I awoke, shaking uncontrollably. The hunger pangs were profound, indescribable. My eyes filled with a nauseating pattern of greens and reds. The ear-splitting screams of what I can only assume were coming from my jacket were unbearable. The jacket writhed and convulsed as it desperately lashed out for nourishment and found none. This alleyway is barren of all other life, and all things save the bare minimum I require to carry out my eternal sentence. That and garbage, but none of that is edible. I myself felt no starvation, at least not in the traditional sense. But this jacket and I seemed to form a symbiotic relationship, and as the overwhelming pain intensified, I managed one precious moment of clarity in the midst of my panic and despair. The jacket was turning its sharp, deadly, concealed pincers on my flesh, feeding on me, deriving what little sustenance it could from its own host. The jacket was sucking my blood. It craved Mountain Dew. My veins not only coursed with that sickly sweet, caffeinated nectar, but without more, I was enduring the most excruciating torture imaginable. And I realized that reviewing Spawn comics was only the beginning of my eternal agony. This level of torture was Promethean. Could I be rent asunder, so completely decimated as to cease to exist in this place? Could I die here? I hoped so. As the jacket sapped the little lifeblood I had left into itself, I yearned for a swift and merciful end. But suddenly, through the delirious haze, I saw the absolute last thing I could have ever expected, and it was the single most beautiful, glorious sight I had ever beheld. It was Batman, and he was holding a can of Mountain Dew. As I desperately grasped for the can, he hesitated for a moment, then begrudgingly gave it up. I downed the green nectar in seconds and immediately felt my strength returning. The piercing instruments left my skin and my vision cleared. As I recovered, I thanked the strange creature, who I realized now as I gained lucidity was not the real Batman. Had I been in my right mind before, that would have been a given. He called himself Tiny Adam West and said that he would be in this alley from time to time to keep me in line. He said to think of him as my personal guide through my personal hell. The rules, he explained, are simple. Review whatever I find in the wastebasket. Failure to do so results in an agonizing eternity of caffeine deprivation. This was only a taste of the potential pain to come. When I asked how I might obtain more, he said they would be available, but only the first one is free. And then Tiny Adam West dematerialized before my eyes. I knew there must be more to this hell than meets the eye. It all seemed far too easy before. What crime must I have committed to deserve all of this? I have finally recuperated and am prepared to review this latest bizarre selection. Spawn the Undead number 4 is a satire of the sometimes rampant commercialism of religion, specifically focused on the most extreme of cults. The scenario is familiar in history. A cult is formed by a con man preying on the gullibility and desperate thirst for relevance of his potential followers. He promises them enlightenment in a flimsy scheme to take every cent from his flock possible. The cult dreamed up by Jenkins here is absurd to the nth degree, based on bad, trashy science fiction paperbacks by the group's self-proclaimed messiah, Reverend Song Sung Blue. Yes, like the Neil Diamond song. Odd. I remember cultural references like Neil Diamond, but I cannot remember the high school I went to or the state I lived in. Blue takes full advantage of his pathetic and confused congregation, uncertain as to which of the many different religions and denominations preaches the real truth. These sad people buy into a bizarre and obvious hoax, drawn in by the allure of a radical alternative that makes each of them not sheep in a flock, but hosts for the coming space children. Their church is a rocket ship, and their graven image, which Blue consults for wisdom and conveniently always demands a symbolic monetary donation, is a giant plastic action figure. Jenkins intelligently keeps this subject a bit lighter than the previous material he has covered. The extent to which Blue takes advantage of these people could be far more disturbing, though it is disturbing enough. After all, he is seducing women to his bed under the guise of a messiah, but it does not become so realistic that it seems inappropriate to find its satire amusing. I seem to have mostly lost my sense of humor along with my memory, but were it still intact, I no doubt would have found much of this clever. For instance, Blue's right-hand henchman is called Mr. Bull. How appropriate. Strange miracles are occurring which validate the beliefs of this congregation, like a very convincing flying saucer sighting. It's another ploy by Heaven's angels to recruit souls for their side, even if it means encouraging some false religion. Spawn simply comes to Blue and tells him a higher power is manipulating his cult. It seems strange Spawn is more concerned with Heaven's machinations than a man lying to all these people in order to get rich. Perhaps the idea is that if Heaven wasn't corrupt, perhaps religions wouldn't be so divided and confusing, and, as the narration says at the beginning, might unite people together instead of driving them apart. So Spawn is technically going after the root of the initial problem. It is unclear if this is meant as a criticism of real-world Christianity or even the Bible itself. Simplifying real-world religions to this degree blurs the line between on-the-nose social commentary and a more subtle allegory. By the end, Blue kills all his followers with poison in a ritual mass suicide, another historical precedent, Jonestown in 1978. I am truly dismayed by how much of my cultural memory remains intact. But so spooked by getting a glimpse of what truly awaits him in the afterlife, Blue kills himself as well. The comic is not clear as to why. I would assume he cannot handle the pressure of being the Messiah while the things he predicted are really happening, and he has no control over them. But he seems to be just scared of Spawn, so he commits suicide. But the premise is interesting, and Jenkins is quite creative with it. There is a wonderful use of quirky language in the narration. As Blue passes out the poison, I especially appreciated this line. "Ah, the path to enlightenment, which so often intersects with the highway of lunacy, slap bang in the middle of the forest of misunderstanding." Jenkins seems to be struggling to find ways for Spawn to intervene in these situations, and the angels seem somewhat unnecessary. I think a story about this cult with Spawn involved beyond saying a few words outside of his contrived balance heaven and hell mission could have been a stronger narrative. And if I must look like Spawn, I am grateful for a better ensemble than what the Spawn-worshipping Blue wears at the end. Signed, Unknown.